The cowboy saved her from a ruthless gang and discovered they shared the same enemy. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, golden shadows across the dusty streets of the small town. The wind whispered through the wooden buildings, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and hay. Travelers were few, and the town seemed almost asleep, though the clatter of hooves and the creaking of old signs gave it a quiet, constant rhythm. Among the scattered townspeople, a lone figure rode along the narrow road. He was a cowboy, tall and strong, with a wide-brimmed hat shielding his face from the sun. His eyes were sharp, always scanning the surroundings, and his hands rested lightly on the reins of his horse. He had the kind of calm confidence that made others notice without demanding attention. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice carried authority, even when it was gentle. Not far from the road, a young woman was hurrying along a narrow trail that led through the outskirts of the town. She carried a small basket of goods, her steps quick but careful. They knew the streets were not entirely safe. Rumors of a ruthless gang had been spreading for weeks. They were known to strike without warning, taking what they wanted and leaving destruction in their wake. Most people avoided the trails outside the town, but she had no choice. Her family depended on her to deliver supplies to nearby farms, and she had promised them she would not fail. Her heart beat faster as she walked. The sound of distant hoofbeats made her pause. She looked over her shoulder, but the road behind her seemed empty. Still, she couldn't shake the uneasy feelings settling in her chest. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should. Every rustle of leaves sounded louder. The trail wound through an open field, with the sun dipping behind low hills, creating deep shadows that danced across the ground. She clutched her basket tighter, trying to ignore the growing fear. Then, without warning, they appeared. A group of rough-looking men, their faces hidden under dusty hats, emerged from behind the hills. They moved with a confidence that spoke of cruelty and experience. The woman froze, her breath catching in her throat. She recognized them instantly, the gang that had been terrorizing nearby towns. She had heard the stories, but now, seeing them with her own eyes, her fear became real. "Ha ha! Looks like we got ourselves a little lady all alone," one of the gang members sneered. His voice was low and threatening. "She's carrying something too. Maybe some cash, maybe food, maybe both." The woman stepped back, trying to find a way to escape, but the ground was uneven, and the men had her surrounded. She could feel her pulse in her temples, every beat echoing in her ears. Her mind raced. What could she do? If she ran, they would chase her down. If she stayed, she could be overpowered in seconds. She searched desperately for something, anything, that could give her a chance. Just as the gang began to advance, a new sound cut through the tense air, the distant clatter of hooves. The woman turned toward the noise, hope flickering in her chest. A figure approached swiftly, riding a tall, strong horse with steady control. The cowboy. He had noticed the commotion from the road and had ridden closer, instinct guiding him toward danger. The gang paused, momentarily distracted by the newcomer. The cowboy's eyes met theirs with a calm intensity that made the gang members hesitate. He did not shout, did not draw a gun immediately. He simply rode closer, his presence alone challenging them. The woman's heart leapt with a mixture of relief and anxiety. This man could be her only chance. The cowboy spoke, his voice steady and commanding. "Leave her alone. You don't want to make this worse for yourselves." The gang laughed, but it was hollow, forced. They had faced threats before, but there was something in the cowboy's demeanor that made them pause. Still, they were dangerous, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. One of them stepped forward, a crude knife in hand, ready to push the limits. The cowboy's hand moved instinctively to the reins and then to the small revolver at his side. He didn't raise it immediately. Instead, he let the horse position him between the gang and the woman, giving her a chance to move. His eyes never left the leader of the group, calculating, alert, ready for the smallest movement. The woman, sensing the moment, took a careful step backward, her basket held in front of her. She tried to stay calm, though her hands shook. She could hear her own breathing, quick and uneven, and she knew she had to trust the cowboy. She did not know his name, nor did she know if he could truly protect her, but she could sense his determination. The gang's leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, growled. "Who do you think you are, stopping us?" he demanded. "This isn't your fight." The cowboy's reply was calm but firm. "Some fights need to be faced, and this one ends now." Suddenly, the tension exploded into motion. The gang lunged forward, knives flashing, horses kicking. The cowboy moved with practiced precision, swinging his own revolver in a warning, firing shots into the ground to make them back off. The air was filled with dust, the smell of gunpowder, and the sounds of hooves and shouting. The woman ducked instinctively, pressing herself against a tree. She could see the cowboy managing to keep the gang at bay, his every move deliberate and skilled. He was not reckless. He understood the danger, yet he faced it head-on. Her heart pounded as she watched him, awe and fear mingling in her chest. Minutes felt like hours, but finally the cowboy created a gap wide enough for the woman to escape. "Go! Run!" he shouted. She didn't hesitate. She ran across the field, stumbling over rocks and uneven ground, her basket swinging but clutched tightly in her hands. She dared not look back, though she could hear the shouts and the gunfire behind her. Once she was out of immediate danger, she slowed, leaning against a fence post to catch her breath. She could see the cowboy still facing the gang, his figure steady, refusing to retreat. She wanted to thank him, to call out to him, but the danger had not fully passed. She whispered a silent prayer for his safety before continuing toward the small cabin where she would be safe for the night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of orange and purple, the woman reached her home. She was trembling, exhausted, but alive. The events of the afternoon played over and over in her mind. The gang, the sudden appearance of the cowboy, the bravery that had saved her life. She realized that without him, she might not have survived, and a deep sense of gratitude filled her. Back on the trail, the cowboy finally lowered his revolver. The gang had retreated, realizing that this was not an easy target. He wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling the weight of the day's danger settle on him. Though he had saved the woman, he knew this was only the beginning. The gang was still out there, and they were ruthless. He had seen enough of their cruelty to know that their paths would cross again. The cowboy mounted his horse and rode slowly into the fading light. He didn't know the woman's name, nor did he know her story, but he felt a strange connection, a sense that their lives were now tied by the events of that day. He was used to traveling alone, relying only on his own skills and instincts, but something about this encounter made him feel a responsibility he could not ignore. As night fell, the town settled into an uneasy calm. The stars appeared one by one in the clear sky, shining like small beacons of hope against the darkness. The woman watched from her cabin window, the memory of the cowboy's courage still vivid in her mind. She knew that her life had changed forever, that the danger was far from over, and that she had just met someone who might become more than just a stranger on the trail. And somewhere down the road, the cowboy rode on, his mind alert, his senses sharp, and a quiet determination in his heart. He had saved a life today, but he knew that true safety was never guaranteed in a world like this. One thing was certain. He had crossed paths with a woman whose life was connected to his own, and the story of that connection was only beginning. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of challenges, the weight of past sorrows, and the glimmer of hope. For the cowboy and the woman, the journey ahead would be dangerous, uncertain, and full of surprises. But for now, the night held a moment of peace, a rare pause before the trials that lay ahead. The next morning, the woman could not sleep. The memory of the gang's cruel faces and the cowboy's sudden appearance kept replaying in her mind. She paced slowly across her small cabin, her fingers tracing the rough wooden walls, trying to calm her racing thoughts. The basket she had carried yesterday still rested on the table, now empty but a reminder of how close she had come to danger. She thought about the cowboy. Who was he? Why had he risked himself for her? She had always believed that the world was full of people looking out for themselves, but he had acted differently. He had been brave, skilled, and careful, yet he had not asked for anything in return. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that meeting him had changed something inside her. A sense of hope stirred, mingled with fear, because she knew the gang had not disappeared. They were still out there, and their intentions were dark. Meanwhile, the cowboy rode slowly through the outskirts of the town. He had spent the night in the open near the trail where he had first seen the gang. The events of the day weighed heavily on his mind. He was used to handling danger alone, relying only on his instincts and experience. But this encounter had been different. Saving the woman had been necessary, but he could not shake the feeling that there was more at stake than just a single attack. As he approached the town again, he caught sight of her walking toward the edge of the field. She had gathered some supplies and looked cautious, her eyes scanning the horizon. When she saw him, she froze for a moment, uncertain whether to approach. The cowboy, sensing her hesitation, slowed his horse and gave a small nod. It was an invitation, quiet but clear. The woman took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come." The cowboy tipped his hat slightly, a faint smile touching his lips. "You would have managed, but it's safer with two than one. The gang isn't done yet." Her eyes widened. "They'll come back?" "Most likely," he said. "And if they do, we'll be ready." She hesitated, then nodded. The unspoken understanding between them was clear. They had to work together if they wanted to survive. For the first time, she felt a strange sense of relief. Even though she did not know him well, she trusted his judgment. They decided to leave the town for a while, moving toward the hills where they could observe the area safely. The cowboy rode beside her as she walked, sharing little pieces of advice about how to stay hidden and avoid drawing attention. She listened carefully, soaking in every word. Her fear slowly gave way to determination. She would not let the gang intimidate her or take what belonged to her family. As the day passed, they found a quiet spot near a small stream. The water was clear and cool, and the surrounding trees provided shade from the hot sun. They rested, sharing a simple meal of bread and dried meat. The woman finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why did you help me?" she asked. "You didn't know me. You could have just kept riding." The cowboy looked at the flowing water, his expression serious. "I've seen what people like them do. I've lost people I cared about because of men like that. Sometimes helping someone is the only choice that makes sense." "I couldn't just leave you." The woman felt a pang of understanding. He had also lost people to injustice, to cruelty, though hers had been smaller, more personal. Her family had resisted the gang's attempts to control the local trade routes, and that had made them targets. She realized now that her fight was not just for herself, but for the safety and freedom of everyone she cared about. I think I understand," she said quietly. "They came for me because of my family. They want to take everything." The cowboy nodded. "And they won't stop until they do. But we can make it harder for them. We can fight back, smartly, not recklessly." For the first time since their encounter, the woman felt a flicker of hope. Together, they could stand against the gang. Alone, she knew she would have been powerless. The cowboy's presence made her feel stronger, braver. As the day faded into evening, they set up a small camp in a hidden area behind some rocks and bushes. The cowboy taught her how to move quietly, how to observe the surroundings, and how to react if danger approached. She listened closely, asking questions and practicing the small movements he demonstrated. He was patient, never condescending, and she began to feel that they were truly a team. Night fell, and the stars shone brightly in the clear sky. The woman lay on her blanket, thinking about the cowboy and the strange turn her life had taken. She had always believed that the world was predictable, but this encounter had shown her that courage and kindness could appear in the most unexpected ways. The cowboy kept watch, alert and vigilant. He did not sleep, though he rested lightly on his horse. He had learned long ago that danger often came without warning, and he could not afford to be caught off guard. Still, he felt a strange sense of calm being near the woman. There was a connection forming, subtle but undeniable, built on shared fear, respect, and the understanding that survival depended on trust. The following morning they decided to explore the surrounding hills, looking for signs of the gang or their hideouts. The woman carried a small pack of supplies while the cowboy rode beside her, scanning the horizon for any movement. They moved quietly, communicating with hand signals and whispers, learning to anticipate each other's actions. As they climbed a small ridge, they spotted smoke rising in the distance. They crouched behind a rock, observing carefully. The smoke came from a small encampment partially hidden by trees. The cowboy studied it closely, noting the movement of people and the sounds of voices. "That could be them," he whispered, "or someone working with them. We need to be careful." The woman nodded, her heart racing. She realized now that the gang's reach was larger than she had imagined. They were organized, dangerous, and determined. But she also saw that the cowboys' knowledge and skill gave them a fighting chance. She felt a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that running away was no longer an option. They had to face this threat together. Over the next few days, they continued to track the gang's movements, learning their habits and weaknesses. The woman proved herself to be resourceful and brave, often finding clever ways to avoid detection or gather information. The cowboy was impressed by her courage and intelligence. He realized that she was not just someone to protect, she was a partner, someone who could think clearly under pressure and act decisively. As they worked together, they began to share their personal stories. The woman spoke of her family, of the struggles they had faced, and of the fear that had haunted her since the gang first appeared. The cowboy spoke of his own past, of friends and neighbors lost to violence and greed, and of the long road that had brought him to this town. Each story revealed pain and loss, but also resilience and determination. They discovered that, despite their different backgrounds, they shared a common desire to stand against those who sought to harm others. One evening, as they rested near a quiet stream, the woman spoke softly. "I never thought I would meet someone like you," she said, "someone who would risk themselves for a stranger." The cowboy looked at her, his expression unreadable but calm. "Sometimes the right thing isn't easy, but it's necessary. And sometimes it's the only choice you can make." The woman nodded, feeling a deep respect and trust for him. She realized now that their meeting had not been by chance. They had been brought together by circumstance, yes, but also by necessity. They needed each other, and together they were stronger. As days passed, they discovered more about the gang's activities. They had been targeting local families, demanding control over trade routes, and using fear to maintain their power. The woman's family had resisted, which made them a direct threat. The cowboy had his own reasons for pursuing the gang, having lost people he cared about in similar attacks. The realization that they shared a common enemy strengthened their bond. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the land, they sat together quietly. The air was filled with the sounds of nature, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. The woman looked at the cowboy, a mix of gratitude and determination in her eyes. "We have to stop them," she said firmly. "Before they hurt anyone else." The cowboy nodded. "We will. But we need a plan. Rushing in blindly will get us both killed." "We have to be smart, patient, and ready," the woman agreed, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She realized now that fear was not the enemy. It was a signal, a reminder to be careful and prepared. And with the cowboy by her side, she felt that they could face the challenges ahead. Night fell, and they settled in for another rest, keeping watch in turns. The bond between them had grown, built on shared experience, trust, and the understanding that survival depended on working together. They had faced danger and fear, but now they were preparing to face something even greater, the gang that had caused so much pain and chaos. The journey ahead would be difficult, but they were no longer alone. Together, they were ready to confront the challenges that awaited them, to stand against injustice and to fight for what was right. And somewhere deep inside, Both of them knew that this alliance, forged in danger and strengthened by trust, was only the beginning of a story that would change their lives forever. The morning sun rose slowly over the hills, painting the landscape with golden light. The air was crisp, carrying the smell of grass and earth. The cowboy and the woman had spent the night near a hidden stream, far from the town, taking care to remain unseen. The previous days had been filled with careful observation, learning the gang's movements and staying alert to every sound and shadow. Today, they hoped, would bring answers. The woman adjusted the small pack on her back, filled with supplies for their journey, and looked toward the cowboy. He was already scanning the horizon, his eyes sharp, hands steady on the reins of his horse. She admired his calm focus. It was a quality that had saved her life before, and she trusted him completely now. "Do you think we'll find them today?" she asked softly, her voice carrying a mix of anxiety and determination. The cowboy shook his head slightly. "Maybe, maybe not. But we'll find something. Evidence, a sign, anything that tells us where they are and what they're planning. That's the first step." They moved cautiously through the hills, the tall grass brushing against their legs as they went. The woman had grown more confident in the last few days, learning to move quietly and watch for danger. She followed the cowboy's lead, observing the land as he had taught her, noting broken branches, footprints, and the distant sounds of movement. After several hours, they came across a small clearing. Smoke rose in the distance, curling lazily toward the sky. The cowboy crouched behind a large rock, signaling for the woman to do the same. They observed quietly, their eyes scanning every detail. There, in the distance, was a small encampment, hidden among the trees. Figures moved about, carrying supplies and speaking in low voices. The cowboy's eyes narrowed. "That's them," he whispered. "The gang. Or at least some of their men. We need to be careful. One wrong move, and they'll see us." The woman nodded, her pulse quickening. She had never been so close to danger before, yet she felt a strange sense of readiness. The fear that had gripped her at the start of this journey was still there, but now it was tempered by courage and determination. She realized that she had learned to trust the cowboy's instincts, and that trust made her feel stronger. They watched the camp for a while, noting the movements of the gang members and the layout of the area. The cowboy pointed out patterns, who seemed to be in charge, where supplies were kept, and the routes they used for travel. The woman took careful mental notes, realizing that this knowledge would be crucial if they were to confront the gang safely. As the sun climbed higher, the cowboy and the woman moved closer, keeping low and using the terrain for cover. They discovered a small outbuilding near the camp, partially hidden by trees. Inside, they saw documents and papers scattered across a table. The woman leaned closer, reading the words silently. Her eyes widened as she recognized the names of families, farms, and businesses that had been targeted by the gang, including her own family's land. The cowboy studied the papers as well. He recognized the handwriting on some of the notes. It was the gang leader's, the man responsible for destroying his friend's ranch months ago. A cold anger settled in his chest. "They're connected," he said quietly. "Your family, my friend, other people in the area, all part of their plan to control the land and trade. That's why they attacked you. That's why I've been tracking them." The woman's voice was barely audible. "So, we're fighting the same enemy." The cowboy nodded, his jaw tight. "Exactly. And now we know the truth. This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about stopping them from hurting anyone else. And for both of us, it's personal." The realization brought a mix of fear and resolve. They had both suffered losses because of this gang, and now they had the chance to fight back, together. The woman felt a surge of determination. She would no longer be just someone to protect. She would be an active part of the plan. She would help bring justice, not just for herself, but for everyone affected by the gang. They spent the next few hours examining the documents and observing the camp. They noted the routines, the times when the gang members were least vigilant, and possible weaknesses in their defenses. The woman suggested using the surrounding hills to their advantage, creating hidden paths and vantage points for observation. The cowboy agreed, impressed by her insight. As the day progressed, they discovered more than just plans and documents. They overheard conversations that revealed the gang's leader was planning a major move to take over a nearby town completely, using intimidation and violence to force the residents into submission. The scope of the threat was far greater than they had imagined. It wasn't just about one family or one farm. It was about control, power, and fear. "This is worse than I thought," the woman said, her voice tense. "We can't wait. We have to stop them before they hurt more people." The cowboy agreed, though his expression remained calm. "Patience is still key. We can't rush in blindly. But we will stop them. And today, we've gained something important. Knowledge. That's the most powerful tool we have right now." As evening approached, they moved to a safer location to rest. They had collected enough information to start forming a plan, but they knew the danger was far from over. The woman set up a small campfire, and the cowboy checked the surrounding area for threats. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Sitting by the fire, they began to discuss their next steps. The woman spoke first, her tone serious. "We need to be smart. We can't just attack them directly. They outnumber us. We need to use what we've learned, find their weaknesses, and strike when it matters most."
The cowboy nodded.
"Exactly. And we need to keep each other safe. Trust and coordination are everything. One mistake could cost us everything." They planned carefully, outlining strategies for surveillance, identifying escape routes, and noting places where they could hide if discovered. They considered distractions, using the terrain to their advantage, and preparing for the unexpected. Every detail mattered, and they worked together seamlessly, their partnership growing stronger with each passing hour. As night deepened, they sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the hills. Crickets chirped, leaves rustled in the wind, and somewhere in the distance an owl called. The woman thought about the events that had led her here, the fear, the danger, and the cowboy who had saved her life. She realized that their connection was more than just necessity. It was built on trust, respect, and the understanding that they were stronger together. The cowboy glanced at her, noticing the determination in her eyes. He had seen fear and courage in many people, but there was something unique about her. She had faced danger head-on, learned quickly, and adapted to every challenge. He knew that together they had a real chance of confronting the gang and bringing them to justice. The next morning, they resumed their observations. They discovered more details about the gang's leader, including past attacks and patterns of behavior. The cowboy shared stories of his own experiences, showing how the gang's cruelty had affected him personally. The woman listened carefully, feeling a deep sense of solidarity. They were not just two individuals fighting against a gang. They were allies united by a shared enemy and a common purpose. Over the next few days, they continued their careful reconnaissance. They mapped the camp, identified supply lines, and noted the gang's patrol routines. Each day brought new challenges, but also new insights. The woman's skills grew, her confidence increasing with every observation and decision. The cowboy admired her courage and intelligence, realizing that she was not just a partner, but a vital part of the plan. One evening, as they rested near a quiet creek, the woman spoke softly. "I never thought I'd meet someone who understands what it feels like to lose everything to people like them." The cowboy looked at her, his expression serious but gentle. "You're not alone anymore. And we're not just reacting to them. We're taking control. That's what makes the difference. Fear is natural, but action changes everything." The woman nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. She realized that the cowboy was more than just a protector. He was a guide, a mentor, and a true ally. Together they were not just surviving, they were preparing to fight back, to reclaim what had been lost, and to prevent further harm. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the hills, they had a clear understanding of their enemy. The gang was ruthless, organized, and dangerous, but now the cowboy and the woman were equally prepared, united by knowledge, courage, and a shared goal. As night fell, they settled into their hidden camp, keeping watch in turns. The bond between them had grown, built on shared experience, trust, and the knowledge that survival depended on their partnership. They had discovered their shared enemy, and with that discovery came a sense of purpose, determination, and readiness. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with danger, uncertainty, and the threat of violence. But they were no longer alone. Together they had the knowledge, the skills, and the courage to confront the gang and bring justice. And deep down, both of them knew that this alliance, forged in danger and strengthened by trust, was only the beginning of a story that would change their lives forever. The morning air was crisp and quiet as the cowboy and the woman prepared for the day. The hills glowed with soft sunlight, and the birds' calls filled the peaceful silence. But neither of them felt at ease. They knew the day ahead would test everything: their courage, their planning, and their trust in one another. For days, they had observed the gang, studied their routines, and prepared for this moment. Now, it was time to act. The woman adjusted her small pack, checking the supplies one last time. She glanced at the cowboy, who was scanning the horizon with steady, unshakable focus. There was a calm determination in his eyes, the kind that only came from experience. She had learned to trust him completely, and that trust gave her a quiet strength. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and steady. She nodded, gripping her small satchel tightly. "I am."
We've planned this well. We can do it.
He gave a small nod, and together they moved through the hills, keeping low and quiet, using the cover of rocks and trees. They approached the gang's camp cautiously, each step measured and deliberate. The sun was higher now, casting sharp shadows across the landscape, and they could see the gang members moving about, seemingly unaware of the threat approaching. The cowboy whispered the plan one last time. "We create a distraction first, draw out the gang leaders, and isolate them. We stay hidden until the right moment. Then we strike together. Remember, precision is everything." The woman nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. She had never imagined herself in such a situation, but now, with the cowboy beside her, she felt ready. She understood that courage was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. They moved carefully into position, finding a small ridge that overlooked the camp. From there, they could see the gang's layout clearly. Supplies were stacked near a barn, horses were tethered near a corral, and the gang leader stood near the center, giving orders. The sight of him, confident and cruel, made both of them tense. They had seen his handiwork before: the destruction, the fear, the pain he had caused. Today they would confront him. The woman took a deep breath and whispered, "We do this together." The cowboy nodded. "Always." With precise timing, the cowboy created distraction. He fired a shot into the air near the edge of the camp, sending a flock of birds into flight and startling the gang members. Shouts erupted as the gang scrambled, trying to locate the source. The woman used the moment to move into a better position, creeping along the ridge to get closer to the gang leader's location. Her heart pounded, but her focus never wavered. The cowboy's voice rang out, commanding and firm. "You're surrounded, it's over!" Some of the gang members froze, startled by his sudden appearance, while others lunged toward him, thinking they could overpower him. The cowboy moved with skill, using his horse to create distance and protect the woman. Each movement was calculated, precise, and deliberate. He was not reckless, and his confidence inspired the woman to act decisively as well. From her hiding spot, the woman observed the gang leader giving orders, unaware of how closely she was watching. She had memorized his habits over the past days: the way he gestured, the way he responded to threats, the weak points in his defenses. She realized that this moment was not just about confrontation, it was about justice. Every action she took mattered, and she was determined to make it count. The cowboy and the woman moved closer together, coordinating their actions silently with hand signals and eye contact. The gang members were confused, unsure where the threats were coming from, and that confusion gave the pair an advantage. They struck at the right moment, using speed and strategy to disarm and disable the gang members. The sounds of shouting, clattering boots, and startled cries filled the air, but the cowboy and the woman remained focused, precise, and calm under pressure. The gang leader, realizing the threat, tried to rally his men. "Don't let them get you." "Attack now!" he shouted, his voice filled with anger and frustration. But the cowboy and the woman had already anticipated this. They moved to block his escape routes, using the terrain to their advantage. The cowboy confronted him directly, standing firm, while the woman ensured the gang leader had no way to flee or regroup. The confrontation was tense, each side aware of the stakes, but the cowboy's experience and the woman's careful planning gave them the upper hand. Finally, the gang leader stumbled, realizing that his control was slipping. The woman stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. "This ends now. No more harm, no more fear." The words struck like a thunderclap. The gang leader froze, then glanced around at the disarray of his men. He had underestimated them both, and now the consequences were clear. One by one, the remaining gang members surrendered, recognizing that resistance was futile. The cowboy kept his revolver ready but did not need to fire. The threat had been neutralized through strategy, courage, and teamwork. The woman exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and emerged stronger. She glanced at the cowboy, who nodded slightly, acknowledging their shared victory. The bond between them had grown, forged in danger, trust, and a shared goal. With the gang neutralized, they began to recover what had been taken: the stolen supplies, the threatened land deeds, and other belongings that had been taken by force. The townspeople who had been living under fear slowly emerged to see the results. Relief and gratitude filled the air, mingling with a sense of triumph. The woman returned home, her family safe, their property restored. She felt a profound sense of closure, knowing that the danger that had haunted them was finally gone. She had faced her fears, worked alongside a courageous ally, and contributed to bringing justice to those who had suffered. The cowboy prepared to leave, as he often did after such encounters. His work required him to move from town to town, helping where needed, righting wrongs, and protecting those who could not defend themselves. But before he mounted his horse, the woman approached him. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." The cowboy smiled faintly. "You don't need to. You were brave, too. You did your part."
That's enough. They shared a quiet moment, understanding that their lives had been forever changed.
The woman had grown stronger, braver, and more confident. The cowboy had found a connection in someone who understood courage, resilience, and the importance of standing up to injustice. As he rode away, the sun setting behind the hills, the woman watched him disappear into the distance. She felt a mixture of gratitude and admiration, knowing that their paths had crossed for a reason. She had faced fear, found courage, and discovered that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. Life in the town slowly returned to normal. People began rebuilding, sharing stories of bravery and hope. The fear that had hung over the community lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of safety and trust. The woman's family continued their work, but with a newfound confidence, knowing that justice could prevail when courage and determination were combined. The cowboy continued on his journey, moving from one place to another, helping those in need and facing danger when necessary. He carried the memory of the woman and the victory they had shared, a reminder that even in a harsh and unpredictable world, courage, strategy, and trust could overcome fear and cruelty. And somewhere deep inside, both the woman and the cowboy knew that their lives had been connected in a way that would never be forgotten. The gang had been defeated, justice had been served, and both had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The story of that confrontation, of fear faced and courage found, would remain with them always. It was a tale of determination, teamwork, and the belief that no matter how ruthless the enemy, right could triumph when people acted with bravery, intelligence, and heart. The night settled over the hills, calm and peaceful, as the woman prepared for sleep. She reflected on the events of the past days, the danger, the fear, the courage, and the victories. She knew the challenges would come again, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. She had found an ally, a mentor, and a friend in the cowboy, and that bond would remain, a silent promise of trust, support, and shared purpose. The cowboy rode into the darkening horizon, alert, watchful, and ready for whatever came next. He had faced danger, protected the innocent, and brought justice where it was needed. But he carried with him the memory of the woman, their shared triumph, and the knowledge that courage and trust could change the course of events, even against overwhelming odds. The story ended with justice restored, a community saved, and two lives forever changed by courage, determination, and the unshakable bond formed in the face of danger. The cowboy and the woman had faced fear together, discovered a shared enemy, and emerged victorious, not just through skill and strategy, but through trust, resilience, and heart. And as the stars shone above the quiet town, there was a sense of hope, of peace, and of the promise that even in the harshest circumstances, courage and justice could prevail.